Most people had air raid shelters in the garden, which they sort of never use. And then gradually, when of course the bombing came for real, and there were 5 bad nights in Swansea, 2 separate ones, and then followed by the 3-night Blitz in 41. And all the time, though, you see the sirens are going. But it got to the stage that between these big ones, you stay in bed. In Mumbles, you would. I mean, in Swansea, of course, it'd be foolish to do that. But down here in Mumbles, we tended the sirens go not to bother. And one night, there was a bit of a fright. My mother didn't hear it, but I was in bed one night and I woke up and I had breakfast the next morning. I said, "Did a bomb come over the house last night?" I said, "No, nothing at all. You must have dreamt it." And I woke up and I heard that an explosion, and it had come over the house and it had dropped on the cliff path. Now, on the Mumbles train the next morning going to school, Graham Allen, who was a police sergeant's son in Newton, said, "What do you think of the bomb last night?" I said, "There was a bomb." "Yes," he said, "came over our house." I said, "No, it came over our house. No, it came over our house." And he went across, coming from apparently from the direction of the bay, across the Mumbles Peninsula, and it dropped down and it hit. It came down at an arc like that, of course, not like that, just like that. And it came down and it landed on the cliff path about 40 yards up from the Esplanade in Langland on the cliff path going towards Limeslade. And when we got off the Mumbles train, we all went straight over to Lang, and there it was. And it was still smoking, this great, and you could still see the shape. If you got the path, you'll see on the left-hand side a very nice semicircle cut out, now all overgrown. But that's where it landed. We went up to see it, you know. But in Mumbles, we were very, very fortunate indeed, and everybody had a grandstand view of the bay. And of course, lots and lots of people crammed into Mumbles, given temporary accommodation down here and what have you, to get away from the Swansea bombing. And I mean, they really had a hell of a beating there. And the thing was, too, you see, night after night, it's not so much the bomb, but you lose your sleep. And men had to go in and do a day's work, kids had to go to school, and it'd be down the air raid shelter. And everybody they never knew, was it going to be another big one, you see. Every time they flew, of course, the warning would go. And you used to hear them, the sirens. The sirens would start off, you'd be in bed, and then you just hear a very, very faint one, then another one, then another one, then another, all building up. And there was one down opposite the Marine, you know, on the pedestal, and there was one in Newton. And at first, we could only barely hear one from Blackpill. And then gradually they all built up, you know, and then of course you couldn't mistake the ones in Mumbles then would go off, you know. On the night of the first Blitz, it was obviously this was going to be a bad night. And we were called down to either called down or there was a parade on the I think it was a Monday night. And a call came that they needed some help. Would volunteers go up to Swansea? And of course, you know, it's like when later on when it's a lark, you know, you're totally unaware of any danger. And this time it was Kenny Bale and Freddie Evans from Gower Place. So we walked up, and of course when we reached Bryn Mill now, you could see really that this was something now. You could feel the concussion coming through from the town as it was going up, you see. And we went up past by the Brangwyn Hall, and we came up now to Hospital Square, and we were stopped now, and there was a senior warden in charge, and he said, "You don't go any further than this. They've got all they can do to handle the middle of town. You haven't got to go. You don't go up there. You'll be in the way. It's congested. They're trying to get the ambulances in and out, this, that, and the other. So we want you here." So I said, "Okay, tell us what to do." And he said, "Well, you know how to put an incendiary bomb out?" And I said, "Yes, we've been taught all that." Okay. And we were now by Hospital Square with the old hospital, and there used to be a police box on the corner there, you remember? Lloyd's Bank opposite, and I think where T.W. Thomas used to be on the corner. And just then, we just arrived and we were in the square. And we heard this, you know, and he said, down. We went down and it landed where the present T.W. Thomas is, just over the other side. This bomb went down. And it seemed to be in the sky. It was my impression. This explosion was in the sky, a great big glow. And then following that, then all the way down Brynnemore Road was a popping, pop, 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 pop. And these were all incendiaries, all the way down. And the warden was, you know, he's a young man. I don't know the hell he was, but he said, never mind the ones on the road, get the ones in the shops. And opposite the Westbourne Hotel, there was a corn, they supplied corn and meal for animals and farms, I suppose, I don't know. But there was this shop window, and it was one right down in the middle burning there, you see. So Kenny Bale and I ran across, and I picked up the sandbag and put it on top, you see, and the flames were coming out on the side, and it wasn't supposed to do that, you see, it was supposed to put it out straight away, but these bloody flames were coming. I said, quick, get another sand, put it there, and I had knitted khaki gloves on, and I was beating these all out like that, and then out it went, and the chap who owned the shop came, oh, thank you ever so much, and he shook hands with us like, oh, right, many time, you know, just let us know. And then there was a, come on, there's no time for small talk. And we went down the road, and there were a few more in the shop windows. We dealt with those. And then suddenly, this from Kensington Crescent, this chap came running out quick. He said, we've got one in our loft. Running in. And there, I always remember downstairs, he went in the area chair, there was a cluster of people all round the table, and a typical family, grandma, grandpa, and they were all there looking up, him charging in, you know, and sort of blind leading the blind, you know, and charging up the stairs. And there was this thing, and it was in there, a little box room at the back, burning there, you know. And what I can remember was the intensity of, in this room, was the intensity of the light. You could hardly look at it, you know. It's just magnesium burning, you know. And put the sandbag on it, you know. And then another one, he went out, and we said, come on. And the boy said, no, he said, he said, you wait with this one. It's indoors. It could be in the floorboards. You got to wait. He really was gemmed up, you know. And then he took charge of us, and then oh, that was just, it was nothing like the havoc in town. And I never felt threatened, not for 1 minute, not blind to danger. There just wasn't any. There didn't seem to be any at all. The action in the Blitz was right down in the middle of the town. This is where it was a bloody inferno. When I was in the army, my brother told me the sad story in Phillips Parade up the side of the hospital, an unexploded bomb there. And a few years previously, when I was in the Mumbles Home Guard, a Major Davis, who had a military medal from World War I, he'd been in the ranks, it wasn't a cross, military medal and bar from World War I, was leaning against the table talking about his work in charge of the bomb disposal squad. And they were messed up in Higher Lane, and that was where all these boys were, with the wonderful red rectangle and the golden bomb on it. I mean, this was prestigious to wear that bomb. These were special men. This is what I call courage. And when Di the Gas Williams in Newton was a sergeant in the bomb disposal squad, and he always used to say to me, as well, I could never jump out of an aeroplane. And I said, Dyer said, I hated it. I was always frightened. I said, but I could never even contemplate tackling a bomb. And Major Davis was down in the hole outside Swansea Hospital working, and he'd given us a lecture on his work and all the different types of bombs. He had all the fuses there, and just leaning against the table talking about his team and how they did it and how they learned from every bomb. That man went down the hole with his sergeant on his bomb, and that day he sent his sergeant up. He said, you go. I'll handle this one. You go. And he was talking on the, he used to have the very primitive way, talking, saying, describing everything he was doing. And that day, in the middle of the day, up it went. And my brother, all the kids, rushed down to Hospital Square at lunchtime to see what was going on. And the crowds around there, all the police off. And there was the police box. And one of the boys pointed, and there was the arm, Major Davis's arm, with the bomb was behind the box. Right behind the box. And my brother told me about that. And when I got home in the early hours of the morning, my mother played hell. I came up the road to the Vic, walked all the way home, and it was snowing. Very light snowfall. And I came in, again, all black. And I knocked on the door of the Vic, and about 2 in the morning, and there were people in the bar. Nellie Hoskins was there, Jack Williams, his wife, was there, and they were drinking cider because there was no beer left, everything gone. And I took my helmet off and I put it on the bar counter. And I didn't know my father was in Swansea that night in Hancock's on fire watching duty. Everybody in the war had to take a turn with their firm of going as fire watchers. And they were issued with sandbag, and they'd be on the roof of all these buildings. And Hancock's was the then tallest building in Swansea, the bottling department down in Wine Street and Little Wine Street. And when the siren would go, he and his colleague would go on the roof, and any bombs fell, they'd put it out. Well, I didn't know it. Dad was up there. My mother was on her own. My brother Colin was in bed. And I came into the bar and I put my helmet down and she hit it, flying. And I just walked away. I was so tired. And I went upstairs and Colin was awake in bed. And he said, Dad's going to bloody murder you when he comes home. He didn't know he'd gone to Swansea. And I said, oh, I was so tired. I had school the next day, you see. And there was school the next school. We went up and we turned back, but the school hadn't been touched until the last night. So the next night, my mother said, you've got to give me your word that you're not going up to Swansea. And Kenny Bale came up. He said, I'm going up again. Are you coming? And I just didn't have the nerve to face my mother and do it, so I didn't go. So I didn't go, and he went on the 3 nights, Ken Bale. And that 2 nights I went down on the square, and I was watching. I saw everything, from the first sirens, and just getting dark, and then we heard the sirens go. And when you were down on the square, you could hear them fight over Port Talbot, somewhere up the valley, God knows where, from miles away. You know, they started, and then there was the pause, and you could see all the Mumbles NFS boys, all the engines were out ready to go, everywhere, all geared up, and then you heard it, you heard the throb, and then the first of the searchlights come on, and then you heard in the distance the ack guns going. They started going like this. And then in it'd come, and then the first thing were the flares, and the whole bay was lit up like day. A beautiful sight, all these flares coming down, floating down slowly, and then when they'd gone, another batch would appear, and then in would come, and then suddenly you'd see across Town Hill a sparkle of lights go like that all the way across, incendiaries all across. And then they'd go, and then you'd see the few remaining ones, and the colour would change to red. From the intense white of magnesium would change to red. And then another lot would come out, and another lot. And then, in the middle of the town, you go, you see them all coming up. And then the fires would get started. And this is where they were desperately trying to put the fires out. And then you see the red glows of the established fires starting everywhere. And then in the middle of the town. And it coincided, the big fire was coincident with the Swansea Valley dip. That's where the big, and you had a silhouette of cranes of the docks on side. And the side of the Guildhall was the lights with the reflection of the light. And they were working. Now, after the first night, they hadn't been able to extinguish all the fires of the first night. So it was a cumulative thing. The second raid came in, and there were more fires, and then the third one came in. And of course, they just flew straight in. They could see exactly where they were going, and they added to the this inferno in the middle of the town. You know, it was absolutely, and that burnt for days. You know, you could see it, and it went up into the sky, into the clouds. You see, and that was a glow that could be seen from Cardiff and Exeter all the way around. You know. And the impact, you know, the percussion, you see the explosion and then the time for the sound to reach you, you know, across the bay. And every now and then there would be something special, I don't know what it was, and somebody would say that's a landmine. And I remember one going off on the top of town. It was one hell of a clatter when it went. But most of them were the sort of hollow boom, you know, but then this one went off on the top of Town Hill.